crimes fade into history, others become legends. But a small number remain frozen in time. Not because we don't know what happened, but because we know exactly what happened, and still have no idea who did it. Tonight's file takes us to a quiet town in Iowa, a place where an entire family went to sleep on a summer night in 1912, and where, before sunrise, 8 people would be dead. This is the Villisca Axe Murders, June 9th, 1912. A quiet, small town in Iowa. A family asleep inside their home. 2 young girls spending the night with friends after a church event. And sometime after midnight, someone entered the house carrying an axe. By morning, 8 people were dead. The Villisca Axe Murders remain one of the most horrifying unsolved crimes in American history. Not just because of the brutality of the murders, but because the killer likely stayed inside the house while the victims slept, waiting. The Moore family lived in the small town of Villisca, Iowa. Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 visiting girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger. On the evening of June 9th, the family attended a church program before returning home for the night. Everything about the evening appeared completely normal. Neighbors saw nothing unusual. No signs of panic, no signs of danger. Just an ordinary family returning home after church. And that's what makes the story so unsettling. There was no warning. No strange figure lurking in the shadows, no dramatic confrontation. Nothing that suggested the next few hours would become one of the most infamous unsolved crimes in American history. Sometime during the night, the killer entered the house. Investigators later believed the murderer may have hidden inside beforehand or entered quietly after the family fell asleep. That possibility alone makes this case deeply disturbing, because it means the victims may never have realized someone was already in the house with them. The killer used Josiah Moore's own axe. One by one, the victims were murdered in their beds. Blunt force trauma, repeated attacks, extreme violence. The children were not spared. Neither were the 2 visiting girls. The entire attack was horrifyingly personal and chaotic. But the strangest details were discovered afterward. Investigators noticed that mirrors inside the home had been covered with cloth. Windows were also covered, as if the killer did not want to see reflections, or did not want anyone outside seeing inside the house. When investigators began examining the house, the scene only became stranger. The killer appeared to have moved through the home with a disturbing level of control. Curtains had been drawn, windows covered, mirrors hidden beneath pieces of clothing. In several rooms, investigators found signs suggesting the murderer had spent time inside the house after the killings were complete. That detail has fascinated criminologists for decades. Because most murderers want one thing: to escape as quickly as possible. But Villisca doesn't feel that way. The crime scene suggests someone who lingered, someone who wasn't immediately worried about being discovered, and perhaps someone who had planned every step long before entering the house. Food had apparently been eaten in the kitchen after the murders. A bowl of bloody water was reportedly found inside the home, and a piece of bacon set near the scene, which somehow makes the entire crime feel even more unsettling, because it suggests the killer remained calm afterward, comfortable, not rushed, almost as if they believed they had all the time in the world. The murders themselves also revealed something unsettling. The victims were attacked in a sequence that still generates debate among investigators. Some researchers believe Josiah and Sarah Moore were targeted first. Others suggest the children may have heard noises during the attack. But because everyone inside the house was ultimately killed, no one survived to explain what happened during those terrifying hours. The exact timeline remains a mystery, and that uncertainty leaves room for countless possibilities. Did someone wake up? Did someone hear footsteps moving through the hallway? Did one of the children realize something was wrong before the attack reached their room? More than a century later, nobody knows. And perhaps that's one reason the case continues to haunt people. The unanswered questions may be more disturbing than the answers. And then, there's one detail that genuinely terrifies people who study this case. Several victims may not have died instantly. Some reportedly showed defensive wounds, meaning they may have been moments inside that dark house where people woke up confused only to realize something horrible was happening around them. By morning, concern began spreading through town when neighbors noticed the family was unusually quiet. Eventually, someone entered the house and discovered one of the worst crime scenes Iowa had ever seen. News of the murders spread rapidly. In an era before television and social media, newspapers became the primary source of information, and the story of what happened inside the Moore house quickly captured national attention. People across America wanted answers. Who could do something like this? Why this family? Why these children? And perhaps most importantly, where was the killer now? The murders shocked the entire country. Newspaper exploded with theories, and almost immediately suspicion spread everywhere. Over the years, multiple suspects emerged. One of the most infamous was Reverend George Kelly. At first glance, Kelly seemed like an unlikely suspect. He was a traveling minister who had passed through Villisca around the time of the murders, but the investigators soon became interested in his behavior. Reports described him as nervous, unusual, obsessively interested in details of the crime. Years later, Kelly confessed. For a brief moment, it appeared the mystery might finally be solved. But there was a problem. His confession constantly changed. Details shifted from one statement to another. Some information matched the crime scene, other details were completely wrong. Investigators couldn't determine whether Kelly possessed genuine knowledge of the murders, or whether he had become psychologically consumed by the case and convinced himself he was responsible. His trial attracted enormous attention. Newspapers covered every development. People desperately wanted answers, but in the end, there wasn't enough evidence. Kelly was acquitted, and the mystery survived. Other suspects included drifters, serial killers, business rivals, and even people connected personally to the Moore family. One of the most chilling theories emerged years later. Some researchers began noticing similarities between Villisca and several other unsolved axe murders that occurred across the United States during the early 1900s. Entire families attacked while sleeping. Little evidence left behind. Murders committed during the night. In some cases, covered windows and unusual crime scene behavior appeared again and again. The theory suggested something terrifying. What if Villisca wasn't an isolated crime? What if the killer had done this before, and perhaps after? No definitive connection has ever been proven, but the possibility remains, and if true, it would mean the person responsible for Villisca may have spent years moving from town to town, vanishing before anyone realized a pattern existed. Long before modern forensic science, long before national databases, long before anyone knew what they were looking for. But despite investigations, interrogations, arrests, trials, and decades of theories, nobody was ever officially convicted. And more than 100 years later, the Villisca Axe murders remain unsolved. Today, the Villisca house still exists, and, unsurprisingly, it became associated with paranormal activity over the years. Visitors have reported strange sounds, voices, moving objects, and feelings of intense unease inside the home. Television crews, paranormal investigators, and curious visitors have all spent time inside the house hoping to experience something unusual. Some claim they did. Others experienced absolutely nothing. Now, realistically, old houses naturally create strange noises. Wood expands, floors creak, pipes shift, and once a place develops a horrifying reputation, people become much more sensitive to every sound and movement around them. But honestly, I think the house disturbs people for a much simpler reason. Because unlike many unsolved mysteries, Villisca feels terrifyingly possible. No supernatural creature, no ancient curse, no impossible explanation. Just the idea that someone could quietly stand inside your home at night while everyone around you believes they are safe. Maybe that's what continues haunting people about Villisca. Not just the violence, but the intimacy of it. The silence, the waiting, the realization that ordinary life continued normally right up until the moment it didn't anymore. A family came home after church. Children went to sleep. The lights went out. And somewhere inside that house, someone was already awake. The file remains open.